stay, but few observations. I think it is quite central to look at the role of the state in the last 30 years and how it has actually created a whole environment, legal and social institutions, which allow for the kind of hatred that is spewed against the Shias and Hazara. And I think that can't be overlooked. I mean, it is fundamental to that. I mean, these attitudes do not germinate in a vacuum. And if you look at the 1970s and 80s, particularly the Zia regime, and General Zia himself was a Sunni supremacist. He even tried to impose laws which the Shias and others sort of protested against, like the forced imposition of zakat in 1980, and within a year it had to be taken away. So, and then the revision of curricula and textbooks, the Islamic studies curriculum, which is taught to Pakistani kids for the last 3 generations, is a Sunni version of Islam. Even Shias have to read that, even Ahmadis have to read that, even other minority groups have to read that. And I think the third is that the security nexus of these groups cannot be overlooked. I think the question that was raised by the gentleman in that corner is central to this, because first of all, the evidence that we have is that when the GHQ was attacked, Malik Ishaq was flown in to negotiate with the terrorists. Secondly, we also see that in Balochistan, the Hazaras are being killed because the Baloch nationalist resistance is being countered by a proxy Islamist version. So there is a national security dimension. And sadly, in the Punjab, why this proliferates, why there's impunity, why no civilian or military government can actually crack down on these groups is because they're enmeshed into the whole jihad infrastructure. And so, unless there's a jihad policy revision underway, you cannot really do much with these groups. And the electoral alliances that have come about in the last few years are actually just a kind of a symptom of the larger malaise, which is that these groups are far more powerful than political candidates. I mean, if you have a 5 to 10,000 people armed militia in a particular constituency, a politician has to be a pragmatist and make peace with them. No politician can actually fight them unless the state backs them, and the state does include the police and the intelligence outfits that operate both at the federal and provincial level. So I just wanted to add this too.
Okay, I think we'll take that as a moment to close. If any of you would like to make any final remarks, now would be the time.
A very brief one.
Sure.
I applaud you, and I support those statements. And just to elaborate a little bit, I think it's very interesting that you mentioned how the potential of offsetting the Baloch nationalist movement with mobilizing Baloch along religious lines. And I think that there's a broad history for the last 3 decades of the state having an interest in using religion to undercut ethnic separatism. And I think it's very easy to draw the connection with the loss of East Pakistan, Bengali ethnic separatism. There are all kinds of potential ethnic separatisms in Pakistan. The unifying factor is a nominal Islamic identity. Some people have taken it upon themselves to promote a particularly militant version of Islamic identity so as to undercut. I think in the case of Balochistan, it's a nice example where the nationalist movement is fairly secular, at times even Marxist. So I think it's worth noting and thinking about that in particular, and I thank you for raising that point.
Can I just one quick point just to complicate the issue, not to push it one direction, but to demonstrate that the situation is quite blurry. So without contesting what was said, there are also indications that Lashkar-e-Jhangvi or elements within Lashkar-e-Jhangvi in Balochistan have linkages to the Balochistan Liberation Army, so an anti-state, ethnic, supposedly secular militant group. So for example, on at least 3 occasions in the past 2 years, when there was a mass casualty attack targeting the Shias, those attacks were preceded by smaller attacks by that were claimed by the BLA or the Baloch Republican Army, the BRA. So when I spoke with this police official in Quetta, he had said that the objective was to, this first small attack pulls the police in one direction, and that increases the possibility for, the big attack to take place, because police forces are far more reduced in other areas of the city. So, that doesn't mean that this is a simple binary, that we either have elements of the state that are connected to these groups and anti-state forces or not. But what it demonstrates is that these groups, like Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, very much have a solid presence in all these parts of the country. They're not like, let's say, ethnic Punjabis who are in Fatah. They're not sort of fish and sort of out of their own water. These are ethnic Baloch who are based there, and there are these kind of tactical alliances that occur between networks within one cells within one network, and seemingly conflicting alliances within that same network.
Yeah, I think I agree with what has been said, but I would like to also complicate this a little bit further. When you have the so-called Islamic State carving large territory and doing its own schools and its own education in physical territory that the rest of the world cannot access, where it creates its space through social media and other alternatives to spread its ideology and things of this nature, it complicates the issue further. And these organizations, the Islamic State and others, they are networks of networks. They connect with each other very fast, and they work and operate at the local level, and they ally with each other very fast. But the forces that try to counter such ideology and such action is slower in response, and this is an issue that there are issues of centuries of myths and misinformation and demonization of the others. There comes out fatwas and religious leaders from this corner of the world, from that country, but translating those into actually a common effort for those who, like if Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani and the Azhar and the others come in some sort of forum, they may come together. It may be their representation, but translating that into the ground, into action, this is still very much lacking in every corner of the world that struggles with this issue. There was a documentary, I think it was by PBS, where they interview former Ambassador Ryan Crocker, who served in Afghanistan and Iraq, where he says the Islamic State is Al-Qaeda 6.0. And I tweeted about that. I said, but the world reaction to this and dealing with it is still, at best, 3.0. So changing education system, yes, this is something, it's a must. But we also need to look ahead of the curve and see where this is going with this much technology, with the transformation of ISIS, yes, came out of governance failure in Iraq and Syria, but where this is going, so that we cannot be 3 steps behind the next time.